Hi, and welcome to the Courage Made Simple podcast. I'm Margareta Kull, a mother of 3 courageous young women and a courageous leader trainer. For the past 20 years, I've helped hundreds of leaders from over 50 countries, from senior executives to aspiring change makers, find the courage to face challenges at work and at home. I know firsthand that leading isn't just about work. Whether it's guiding a team at work, setting boundaries at home, showing up for the people who matter most, or navigating other tough decisions, courage is essential in every part of life. It's how we become the people we want to be. This podcast is a space to explore the messy questions of being a leader at work and at home. Through insights, tools, and personal stories, we'll help you find your courage. If you're ready to move from feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or frustrated to becoming a more confident, capable, and courageous leader, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Today I'm joined by someone special to me, my very good friend Laurie Kehler. She and I met while working in the advertising industry in Melbourne, Australia. Laurie was the creative end of marketing and advertising, and I was on the account management side. Together, we were an impressive team. Now she's back in California, writing books about the intersection of nature and faith. You can see her beautiful work at thenatureofhopeshop.com. Laurie, welcome to this, my very first podcast episode. I am so excited about this.
Thank you, Margaret. It's so great to be here. I'm excited to dive into this with you because when I first met you after all those years again, and you told me you were talking about courage, I was like, or leaders, making leaders. I'm like, well, I'm not a leader. My sister is, but I'm not. And I've learned so much about what makes a courageous leader from you. So I'm excited to dive into this.
Thank you. And you are definitely a courageous leader, Laurie. That's for sure. That's for sure. I think that's probably going to be obvious during this interview or conversation.
So let me ask you a question, Margareta. Why this podcast? Well, I mean, you're really busy. I'm always hearing from you like, oh no, can't meet with you. I'm traveling to Germany. I'm going here and there and doing your trainings. So why are you doing this podcast, and what do you want listeners to take away from it?
Well, first of all, I think it's so funny that you're asking me this question, because the reason I'm having this podcast is the person I'm talking to at this very moment. It's you. Because I mean, you and I go back so many years, and I remember a conversation you and I had walking along the beach in Half Moon Bay, and we talked about relationships and friendships and courage. And you are really the person who inspired me the most when it comes to seeing that there are other people, there are other needs for courageous leaders. Or there, how do I express this?
Well,
There,
most people hear that term and they think business. And
yeah,
some people
yeah.
are not in the business world. And they're like, well, I don't need to be courageous leader. But if you're a parent or you operate within a community or a family, you still need to learn how to be a courageous leader, because we all come across situations where we think, I don't like this. I feel uncomfortable and I don't know what to do here.
So true. So true. And that is what you reminded me, or helped me see, because you then reminded me of my 3 courageous daughters who are really courageous. I've thought a lot about it lately. So you are the main reason I want to do this work. How do I say that in a good way? I don't know, but
No, that's fine. I think it's really important because most people think of leadership. I know you hate that word, but they think of leadership, you might want to explain, why do you hate that word? Because I can't find other words a lot of the times, but leadership doesn't just apply to business. It applies to getting along with your relatives. It applies to getting along with your neighbor. It applies to, if a lot of people are doing their side gigs from home, their little side businesses. I mean, we all have needs to learn how to be courageous in different situations, especially when we have to let someone know how their actions make us feel, or telling people tough information like parent to child, like, yeah, this is information I need to deliver and I'm nervous about how they're going to
Mm,
respond.
mm,
And it's been so fun watching you just with your daughters, like bullying or going for hard jobs that they don't know if they qualify for, just watching you coach them and show them this is how a courageous leader would act. These are the steps you take. Ignore your feelings. We all feel nervous,
mm,
but just move forward.
mm.
And it's been so interesting to me because my sister is the big businesswoman. She manages lots of people, and I would rather run down the street naked. I don't want to manage anybody, but I have to learn courage. How do I execute courage in all my interactions?
Yeah, it's interesting. I now came to think of the difference I always make between being a manager and a leader. And I think this is when, how you started off saying, well, it's interesting how people always think about work when we talk about leaders. It's important that we learn to see the difference, get to see the difference. In so many languages, people use the same, think those two things are synonymous. A manager is a leader and a leader is a manager. So you say manager in a couple of sentences and then you just change to leader suddenly. To me, they're two very different things. So a manager is someone who has a budget and a personnel responsibility. We all know what a manager is. I don't need to sit here and talk about what a manager is. But a leader is someone showing the way so that others choose to follow.
Hmm.
So every parent ought to be a leader and a good leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really interesting. It's exactly what you're saying. I think a leader is someone creating change. You see something and you want it to be better. You want it to improve. You want to change something. And then you need other people to follow you. And
This reminds me of all your HOA discussions. Like sometimes within your HOA, things are going on that you're like, oh, this is
yeah,
horrible.
yeah.
But you need to learn how to be a courageous leader in that
Mm-hmm.
situation. Come up with an idea,
Mm-hmm.
for, you know, talk about it in a compelling way so that people want to follow and buy into your plans, your ideas.
Mm-hmm.
That's super applicable.
That's exactly right. And that's of course what it's like at home too. You can't just
Dictate.
you can't just dictate. Exactly. It's so tempting, especially, you think of those small children, you can move around physically, but then suddenly it's pretty hard. So, so you can't only dictate because you lose them. They won't make wise decisions for themselves because they've had someone else telling them what's right and wrong.
They'll follow you because they have to. They're under your
That's
control.
right.
But the minute they can, they'll be like, yeah, forget this. As opposed to with nuance and showing them why it's a better idea to go this way.
That is so beautiful, Laurie. That's beautiful that you're saying, because what you're describing is the difference between a leader and a courageous leader. Because a leader is showing the way so that others choose to follow. So that we can have the dictator at home as an example. They are scared, This parent of mine is going to get really mad if I don't do that, whatever it is they want me to do. So I follow. I choose to follow. But a courageous leader is someone who's showing the way so that we choose to follow of our own free will. So there is no fear involved. And that is why it's scary to be a leader.
Hmm.
Because the power doesn't lie with the leader. We want to believe that it's lying with the leader. But I mean, if the kids or the HOA people or the people at work choose to do something totally different than what I believe is best, then, as someone expressed it once, it's you just someone out going for a walk in the park. You're not a leader because you don't have anybody following you.
Mm.
So the power lies with the follower, and that creates fear easily in you. So what you can easily do is to start to dictate because you're afraid of, subconsciously afraid of what's going to happen.
And I think most of us have worked for dictators, like, this is the way it is. I'm your
Yeah,
boss. You'll be fired if you don't do it this way. Or a
yeah,
parent who says, you're under my house, you're under my roof, you do what I say. And it's
exactly.
just so base level, knee jerk, this is what we all default to.
Yep.
And yet it's not compelling. It doesn't inspire anyone. It's interesting. Well, okay, why should I listen
That's
to you? Tell me your background.
that's
Like,
I was going to say this is because of all those dictators and bad bosses I've had. I'm not like saying all of them or so many, but because of the ones I've had, I really saw the need for courageous leaders in businesses who make wise decisions. So, what did you ask me?
oh, so
Why?
why should I listen to, like, everything we're saying, everybody could nod their head and go, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
I see that.
Okay.
But who are you and why should I listen to you? What's your expertise in this area?
Well, for the last 20 years, my team and I have trained leaders. That goes from senior executives to management teams and to aspiring change makers in organizations across the globe. We have trained people from more than 50 countries in longer and shorter programs, usually longer, and workshops and so forth, often in teams or mixed groups. So there's a lot of experience there. And I now want to share that experience with even more people who don't always have access to that type of training. And I want to do that through the podcast.
Yeah, and when I went to your website and saw all the glowing reviews of people in these like Fortune 500 companies and how much you've helped their teams work together and helped them shed their sort of knee-jerk dictator approach and become leaders that people
Mm.
really want to follow, it was very impressive. I think that's cool. But I have a burning question. There are, if you go on YouTube or you go anywhere on the internet, everybody's a coach. Like, I'm a life
Mm.
coach, I'm a business
Mm.
coach, and everybody's doing coaching and programs. How, and you hate that word. Every time I say you're a business coach, you're like, I'm not a coach. So explain to me the difference between people calling themselves a coach and what you do.
That is actually not true. I don't hate that word because I am a coach. I am a certified coach within International Coach Federation, which is, the largest coaching organization we have in the world. And I've been certified coach for many, many years. So coaching is an important piece of the training we do. Let me just say a few words why I don't call myself a business coach or a leadership coach or something like that. Because coaching and training are two very, very different things, which every certified coach knows. So when you're coaching someone, what's running the conversation is the coachees, the person being coached, his or her agenda. It's not yours as a trainer, which you have as a trainer. So you facilitate self-discovery and personal growth to unlock their potential. What it really means is that you mirror them, what they are saying. You ask open-ended questions, tough questions, challenging questions. You help them see what they are unaware of in a beautiful way. Lots of empathy, lots of reflection, and you're not leading. Okay? You're not showing the way so that others choose to follow you. No, no. You're there as a partner.
So you're helping them uncover, because a lot of people don't even know what drives them, like why they're afraid or why
Yeah,
they're stopped in their
yeah,
career, why they can't seem to move forward. So
yep,
you help them discover that.
yep.
Okay.
So I'm, in our conversations, you are without knowing it, probably coaching me, and I'm coaching you. Because you're asking me challenging, non-judgmental questions, helping me see things I don't see. You know how we started this before we recorded. You were talking about your situation, and I'm saying, yeah, I can offer some help. Just, ask you some questions to help you see what's going on, which is what I need in my life as well. So that's coaching. Training is something totally different. Training, then you have an agenda. And you're open with the agenda. It's not
Oh,
like
so like the HR person comes to you and says, "We need help with this."
yeah, we need, exactly. So going in as a coach, um, I can be curious about their way of leading. I can be open, saying, I coach people to be courageous leaders. Is that your purpose? Because otherwise, I shouldn't be coaching you. It should be someone else. But that's when we're sitting in a separate setting, just you and me. Training is when you can do that, of course, one to one, but we do that in groups. And then we train people to be courageous leaders. Every one of them gets their own courageous leader coach as well. So they have individual conversations. But then we share knowledge. In the training, we go away off-site trainings or online, and we provide them with tools and workshops to learn certain skills and increase their knowledge about certain areas of leading.
Interesting. So
Does
you
that make
also
sense?
do one-on-one with CEOs, is that right? For
Yes.
premium. So
Yes.
what would you say? Because most of us look at the boss and think, well, they don't have any problems.
Oh.
They get to just dictate and tell us all what to do. So in your one-on-one coachings with CEOs and leaders of big industries throughout
Mhm.
Europe, what are some common fears or problems that they run into?
Well, I think the key one the is, and not everybody dares to see it themselves, but the key one is usually loneliness. Because it is lonely up there. It is not, it's something we need to accept. It's not something to judge or pretend it's not there. You have a huge responsibility. And your team, which you hopefully trust, is reporting to you, and they need your support. And that is lonely. You need to make wise decisions up there. So that's one. Number two, which is part of that, is that very, very often they lead teams in which members don't take full responsibility for the whole business. They take full responsibility for their area of responsibility. So, you could be a sales director or a marketing director or a CFO or something, and you're great at that work. So I'm not saying anything bad about those people. But what is very, very, very often taking place is that they do their best to run that area that they're responsible for as effectively as they can.
So, Margareta, you were talking about CEOs or even just head of management teams, like top leaders within a team or a managerial group, and how they get really frustrated that the managers beneath them or that they manage only care about their own little kingdoms, their own, like sales only cares about sales, and marketing only cares about marketing, and engineering only cares about engineering. And they don't take responsibility that they're not just putting bricks around a door. They're building a cathedral, right? They're responsible for the whole thing that they're all creating together. So how can CEOs or lead managers get those people to think about the whole organization that they're all a part of?
That is a journey, and that needs to be a journey because it it's created through trust. And trust is not something you just order on the internet, you know. You or order online, I should say.
Well, also, trust doesn't automatically come with a position. People think, well, I'm in this
No.
position over you, therefore you must trust me. It's like, no, it's earned.
No, 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 no. Trust comes through openness. So you need to create a team which dares to be open. And I've heard so many managers during the years say, my team is open. Oh, they tell me everything. And then I ask them, usually an uncomfortable question. I ask them, how do you know that? And then they get quiet because we don't know if people are open with us or not, because we don't know what they don't say. So trust comes through people daring to share who they are and what
Okay,
they
I
think.
immediately have a visceral reaction to that because I'm like, no, 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 no. If I show, like in the wild, if I show my soft underbelly, I'm going to get attacked and taken advantage of. No, I'm not going to be open. How do you get people over that hurdle?
Because they dare to. It's not like you force them to open up. You give them the possibility of being curious about themselves in the context of the team, so they all grow together. So, it's like me coaching you and coaching others at the same time. So I ask questions, and then you go immediately, you start to think, yeah. So I'm saying you maybe, I'm talking about a situation, and then I'm saying, what's uncomfortable about that? And then everybody starts to think, and then you start to share, and then you realize, oh, we're all human. We've all got these funny, exactly. So that's how you grow, and the trust comes. It does, as you said, it doesn't come, it's not a quick fix. It comes through time.
So have you actually seen team members who are extremely protective about their
Oh
little
yeah.
territory and refuse to share? Because if I share my weaknesses or fears with the rest of the members of the team, A, they're not going to respect me. B, they're going to take advantage of me. You've actually seen people overcome this?
Oh, for sure. It happens on a regular basis. Most people come in and think either they think they are open
Yeah.
or they don't want to be open and they'll never be open. But then they see the strength in it. And so it's not like my team and I, my trainers and I, we never force anybody to do anything. Never. And we never pull pants down on people, But you offer it to someone, and you offer them questions they are not usually thinking about when it comes to their life and their business and so forth. So that's why I'm saying it is never a quick fix, and it's never forceful. And what happens then is that, I mean, we had a management team not long ago who we gave them in a training, we gave them an hour to discuss what's most important to the team now. They're going through major change in the organization. Do you know what they spent the hour on? We're talking about the most senior management team in an international business. They spent that hour, put someone up at the whiteboard from the team. My co-trainer and I, we were just sitting separately. They decided to list all the fears about the change process in the organization that they were going through at the moment. Their fears and probably the fears of their people, just so they know how to navigate in that reality. So what they do is through openness, They start to see reality and they dare to live with it instead of pretending it's not there or that they can just control it, which they can't.
Mm-hmm.
That is openness. That is a management team that's built on trust. The danger, the huge danger that is taking place in most businesses, I can say, where there is not an open team, where managers dare to go with their issues that they are concerned about, is that they go somewhere else. Because a human need is to feel included.
Mm-hmm.
Inclusion is probably the key need of a human being.
Oh, you have a
You
list
don't
of those. What were those lists in your book? Everybody has a need to feel.
significant,
Yeah.
competent, and liked. And significant is connected to inclusion.
Uh-huh.
So if you don't feel included, I mean, I'm not saying, if you don't trust the members of your own management team that you belong to, that you can go there with all these challenges that you're facing as a manager today. I mean, it's massive. You have the short-term goals, you have the long-term goals, you have the budget restraints, you have the financial situation of the world, you have keeping talent, attracting talent, in all of that that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And where should you go? And then you got yourself to navigate in the middle of all of that. If you can't go to the management team that you belong to as a member, what usually happens is that you go to the team you're supposed to lead. So you suddenly start to prioritize that team and that team's needs instead of the whole business. It's costing the company a fortune.
So the fear, what's the major fear? Why don't they move up a level and say, okay, I'm dealing well? Are they afraid they're going to be looked at as, oh, now we know you're incompetent?
Yes, exactly. Because they haven't been through a process. Exactly, that's exactly right. And we all walking around having the fear of feeling incompetent. We all have that fear. And we're going to live with it and die with it. It's just important that we see it so we can navigate around it. When I'm talking about the management teams, I sometimes refer to one of the CEOs who could just see it was exactly this situation I'm talking about, where the division managers or directors were just feeling responsible for their area, and they changed all of that through a program. And he said we could have increased our turnover by 20%. It was a major piece of business. I can't remember. I don't dare to mention the numbers now, because then I'm going to get it wrong. So you can check the book, because I've got it in there. 20% of the turnover would have increased. I think it was over 2 years or something. It could have been achieved. He said if they had known earlier what they knew at the end of the program. I mean, it's, of course, you've got people who say, no, I don't think we should invest in that. I'm sorry we've come this far in the investment. It was the wrong decision. We need to pull back. Or we should go this way, in line with strategy, instead of starting to be operative. All those things, they make a difference to bottom line.
Boy, that takes courage to say, yes, we've sunk millions into this
Yep.
plan, but it's not
Yep.
working. We need to just write it
Yep.
off.
Yep. And I'm thinking of a particular example. Exactly that happened. It was a manager who walked into one of those milestone meetings. And he hadn't been there for the first milestone. And they had the team that had been part of the milestone meeting, who were there to say yes or no, didn't dare to say no. They felt uncomfortable to say no to the investment because the project team had come so far into the investment. And then this senior manager, who was then part of the training, or had been, can't remember which, he then came to milestone 2, and they'd come even further into the investment, major project. And he said, no, this is not on strategy. Oh, but we've done this and we've invested so much. Yeah, I'm sorry. We're not doing it.
That
Mm.
I could give you a crude statement, but yeah, that takes courage.
It takes courage,
It takes
doesn't it?
you know what of you know what
Yeah,
of
yeah.
steel. Wow. Okay, so what if you're HR? You just people dismiss you. You're just HR,
Mm.
but you see there's a need for this,
Yeah.
and they feel frustrated and powerless. How can this help HR?
Well, I think, first of all, I want to give HR empathy, because they see, and they know they see, a lot of things that the rest of the management team doesn't see or doesn't want to see. They definitely have the competency to see it, but it's more comfortable for them not to see it. So as HR, you need to, with empathy and persistence, show financial examples. You don't need to. I mean, sometimes you don't need to, but it's an idea. I think it's a good idea to do it. To give an example like I did now, what does that cost you if you go into the wrong project, for example, or if you don't dare to pull back, or if you don't dare to move into digitalization, for example. All these things that we don't dare to do, and we give ourselves good reasons not to do it. So I think that's important for HR. For HR, I also want to say it's important to start to dare to lead. We've had groups, mixed groups of HR people, usually HR, CFOs, other support people, sustainability managers in the same group, because they are leaders. They need to create change. They go into different management teams, and they very often become a very serving person in that management team instead of leading with their area of expertise. So as an HR person, you need to dare to lead.
Do you have a program just for HR to help them with that?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's, I shouldn't say but, and it's not a quick fix for them either, because they also have their internal hurdles. And they need, as we talked about earlier, they need to take space, dare to lead, dare to feel significant, dare to say no in a foreign management team.
I always, just to get over that fear, a lot of times, whether it's starting something new or even when I was asked to be a teacher of a cooperative homeschooling group, I had a group of 9 preteen boys, and I was like, I don't know
Yeah.
how to keep these kids active. And all. It was like, what is the worst that can happen? Are they going to
Yes.
throw food at me? No. Are they
No.
going to, call Child Protective Services and they
No.
report me? No. So
No.
I always think, well, what is the absolute worst? Like, what am I really afraid of?
Yeah.
And then
So
just
true.
just go ahead and start.
Yeah.
Just speak up, say
And you
whatever.
know what
See
the
how
second
get a
question?
sense of curiosity. Like, let's just see how this lands and speak up.
Yes.
So good. So good, Laurie. And then there's a follow-up, a good, powerful follow-up question on that. What's the worst thing that could happen? First one. Second one is, what do I do then? If that happens, what do I do then?
I
And as
love
soon
that.
as
If that, what next? What then?
yeah.
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 And then you realize, well, I'll survive that too.
So, what does it mean to lead courageously, and why is that so important today?
Honestly, Laurie, I think there's nothing more important. They have a huge impact. A courageous leader makes a difference. You make a difference at work. You make a difference in your own life, at home, and also you make a huge difference for the planet. And sometimes when I talk the planet, people say, "Oh, that's climate change. That's so far away from us, or we can't afford that, or whatever." When I talk about planet, that as a courageous leader, you do what's best, not only for your business, but also for the planet. That means that you are thinking about people's safety, freedom of speech, people without a voice. You're talking about can we talk about more? Democracy. All those things that are really, really important to us. That is part of the planet. And a courageous leader has their focus on the business as well as on the planet. Also when it's uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So you and I, when we're complaining about some of the bosses we've had, they weren't courageous leaders. That's for sure. And they were not self-aware. They were not even curious about themselves. Not at all. And still, they thought they were courageous.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I find so uncomfortable. A courageous person rarely says that he or she is courageous. Mm-hmm. Because you're humble. Life is pretty tricky.
So can anyone be a courageous leader, or is it something you're born with? Because I look at my sister who manages foundations and people and different companies, and she's, like I said, I'd rather run down the street naked. Mm-hmm. And I just look at her and I think, well, that's how she was born. That's who she is at her core. She's a courageous leader. But I don't see myself as that. So how does someone become a courageous leader?
You do a couple of things. First of all, you make choices that you're prepared to do what's best, also when it's uncomfortable. I was talking to someone about this yesterday, and I said, yeah, that's right. That's what Mum did. She was a true courageous leader. Wherever she went, she was leading. And it was fairly uncomfortable just to watch her, to be honest, to be a kid and just look at her and I think, oh, I'm so embarrassed.
Can you give an example of her demonstrating courageous leaders?
I remember she was going to a meeting at school in a new town we moved to, and Dad said to her, now you don't come back as the chairman of the board of that organization, which she of course did. She was hopeless, but she was just, if you ask me to give you an example, she told me that she didn't know how babies were made until she was 19.
Wow.
She had no idea. She decided that she was going to answer to any questions that my sister and I had when it came to sex or whatever. Mm-hmm. And now when I tell you about that, I think you can also imagine how uncomfortable she was around those issues. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really talked about as such, but she just decided that her children were not going to be in that position.
Well, you talk about courageous parenting. I've learned a lot from my husband because he just naturally does that. And he has already raised 3 teenagers by himself. And so when our son that we had together came along, I was from a family where you dictate. You're under my roof, my rules. You do what I say.
Yeah.
And it was terrifying for me to, I don't believe in the child rules the home, whatever they want, we do. But this middle ground where you cajole, you enchant, kind of, you make it appealing to both parties, like a win-win. Like, well, if we do it this way, you'll get this, which I think is ultimately your goal, as opposed to that, and it took more work. It felt scary to me, like I'm losing control. But it was more of a winsome way to win them to your side. And I had to learn. It was hard to not just go to, look, my rules, my way, or the highway.
Yeah. But then imagine what your relationship with them would have been like today.
Yes. And my husband has a saying, and he says, control kills love. And it's so true. Like, you might get them to obey you and do what you want, but they're simmering with resentment.
Yeah.
They're festering with bitterness. They can't wait to leave your house.
No, it's so true.
And I've seen this with some of my relatives. They put down the hammer, this is the way, and aren't we doing a great job? We're full of discipline, and the kids are compliant, but underneath they're like, I cannot wait to get out from under this.
So true.
And I don't and they won't have a good relationship
No,
because
no.
control
Yeah.
kills love.
Yeah.
And it's been so interesting to me to watch.
But the thing is, Laurie, that control, that what you're talking about is fear-based control. And you're describing it that way. If I don't control, they're not going to follow me. So
they're not going to turn out the way I think they should.
Exactly. So you increase control if you think about that. But there are also people in businesses, and of course outside of business, because it's still the same soul you're carrying around. But there are still also those of us who find it hard to control. So we avoid control when we ought to control and set boundaries. How many parents don't find it hard to say you need to be at home at this time? And of course not of course, but sometimes the teenager doesn't come home at that time, and you don't give them any consequences at all because you're scared of what's going to happen. So this is, I think, what we're talking about, and we see that in businesses. So we have we have people who control too much, and we have also people who avoid control, really scared of setting boundaries. And setting boundaries is something you need to do both at home and at work. And it creates good, powerful relationships.
You taught me a lot about being a courageous leader with my son, because, I love to avoid deadlines or committing myself to anything.
No,
and
I had no idea, not noticed.
I can be very slippery when it comes to that, and you don't allow it. You're like, so nice that you agreed that we're going to do this. And what time and what day are we going to do that? And I'm like, So I've done this with my son. I'll say, okay, we need to make that appointment. And he's like, yeah, we do. Okay, then. So let's get out our schedules. And you could just see him like writhing and twisting, like, oh, she's making me commit.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder where he's got that behavior from.
Oh, hush up. I think this podcast needs to end now.
So when we talked about earlier about you needing to stop and be quiet, that's why it's so important for you to be curious, because you need to catch the moment when you start to shrink as well. Because you know how we have so many people, we can talk about managers, senior managers, doesn't matter, who have a defense that makes them grow. They make themselves very big and very loud. And then other people, maybe like you with your upbringing, you start to pull back and be quiet. But you need to be curious about that, so you catch it just as much as you catch it when you get angry. So many people wait to set boundaries because they find it so uncomfortable. So when they set boundaries, they're like, you've got to do this and you've got to do it by then. And then the other person doesn't feel any empathy. And as the person setting the boundaries, you're so scared of what you're going to hear. So you don't dare to be curious because you don't know how to handle it. All you do is I just want to set this boundary. But you can set the boundary and still be curious. I say, I understand you're having difficulties to come to work in the morning. I realize that, you have small children, your spouse is traveling or whatever. And then you say, and, you don't say but. And then you say, and, you still need to be here by 9. That's what you, Laurie, I realize you're juggling all these accounts. It's terrible. You're in a foreign country. You might have, challenges and all of that. We still need to deliver by May the 1st. So,
or even better, so understanding all that, which is a reality, how can we make this work? Because still got to work. Yes, I see all that. And how are we going to make it work? So I loved in your book where you talk about the different sort of personality types, like the dominating leader or the, well, I've just done the best job I could. And
Yeah.
how those are two very different personalities. And I remember in your book, you had a short thing, like there was that dominating person who's like, this is the way it's going to be done. Don't ask.
No, I'm talking about, you're probably thinking about the six defenses.
Yes, yes. I love that part. Can you go through that? That was so
Yeah.
great.
I also love to talk about the defenses. They're my favorite part because I think they're incredible. They're very powerful. So the defenses kick in. That's right.
The book. Oh, that's right. Here's your book. Courageous Leader. Increase your impact by facing your fears. Yeah, this is so powerful. Okay, so go through the
Yeah,
defenses.
it's
Full of stuff, honestly. The six defenses, there are many other defenses, but the six main defenses are
The denier, the victim, the critic, the helper, the masochist self-blamer, and the demander.
and we all have them. We all have them. And we have them all.
Mm.
It's just that we have our favorites.
Yeah, I
And
love the way you just say the denier's motto. Hey, no problem. Like, it's all fine. You know?
Yeah.
Because I don't need to deal with it. If I don't see it, I don't need to deal with it. That's probably you not seeing emails you need to answer. That's when the denier is kicking. It's just not there. I didn't see it.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I have an excuse. I have like 4 email boxes and they fill every day.
Yeah, that's the victim.
I get that. Okay, then you've got the victim. Yes, poor me. Life's so hard. And how do you deal with the victim?
Well, you ask powerful questions where you help them see their own part of things. Because when we can talk about them, but the uncomfortable part is that we should be talking about us because we all have them. So when we play the victim, what we do is we feel sorry for ourselves, we get empathy, but what we're actually doing is putting the blame on someone else. So we say things like, things would be better if it wasn't for my boss, or my team, or the recession, or the war, So I don't need to change anything.
Ah, okay.
So many managers ask me, how do I lead victims? Because they have victims, and victims just stay put. They don't move forward, and they don't feel accountable for anything.
You should do a whole podcast episode on the victim. Okay, the critic.
Yeah.
I know better than you.
Yeah.
Their motto.
So you feel a lot better because you're criticizing someone else. And you can be a silent critic. Laurie, you know about this one. Anyone who's been a teenager or has had teenagers or have met teenagers know about critics. I usually say when I came home, I just opened the door. I was wrong. They just looked at me, raised their eyebrows and said, oh, what are you doing here? That's the silent critic. We have them in businesses. We have them in management teams.
Yeah.
Very uncomfortable.
Then you have the helper. You write here, if I totally devote myself to other people's problems, I won't have to deal with my own. So the helper's motto is, there.
You know what? This, I'm starting to discover, is extremely costly to businesses. Because what's happening is, when you're a manager, you ought to be strategic. And that's tricky. It's difficult to be strategic. So you find all reasons you can find not to have to deal with strategy and sit down and work on strategy. Not only should you create it, you should also agree with your team on it. It's really challenging. So suddenly someone below you in the hierarchy asks you for help. And suddenly you're very helpful. You're just like, oh, I can do that.
And then you complain.
Oh, because that's so much easier than the hard.
So much easier. So much easier. So I usually look at the management teams that we're training and I say, you are highly overpaid to do their job. You should do strategy. And they all shiver.
But that's the hard part.
That is the hard part. And that's what you're paid to do.
Okay, then you have here the masochist, the self-blamer. I blame myself. for everything before anyone else can.
Yeah.
So their motto is, it's my fault, it's all my fault, which
Yes.
I guess is a defense mechanism. So don't tell me anything. Don't
Yeah.
blame me because I've already blamed myself.
Exactly. I've already thought of it. I've already thought of everything. So I don't need to move. I don't need to change. So I don't get any negative feedback because I know it's so bad already.
And it's for sympathy, right? Because they want the person to not say,
Mhm.
actually, you did this wrong. Let's agree on that. And how are we going to move forward? You just want them to go, oh, no, it wasn't that bad.
It's about a little bit about you and your 4 email boxes.
Hey, stop putting this on me. It's uncomfortable. Okay, the demander. By demanding, I may get someone to compensate for my inadequacies, and I will not have to deal with them myself. So the demander's motto is more, more, more.
Yeah.
You can imagine, don't you have people in your surroundings who need to feel extremely, not, it doesn't have to be extremely significant all the time. So they always, yeah, you give it, you need to say, yeah,
I show you.
Oh, you're doing
showing you.
so much, and let me
Yeah.
applaud you. And
That's
oh,
right. And
wow.
you're so
Yeah.
competent and yeah.
demander. Can't fill the big black hole themselves.
So they want other people to
The
do it.
Grand Canyon of need.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right.
And we all do it. So we need to laugh at it.
Yeah. This book is great. I think everybody should get this book because it just makes you smile with recognition.
It
I mean, I
does.
thought at first, oh, why should I read her book? It's all about business leadership,
Mhm.
whatever. But I learned so much about myself and dealing with other people that I find difficult.
Yeah, it
And
is.
getting curiosity about myself, like, why are you reacting the way you do, and how can you fix that?
That's great. I'm so glad to hear that. I learn by reading it myself.
So have you had people in business who've been through your courses and been through your leadership training? Have you had them say, "Oh my goodness, I've been able to apply this in my home life with
Oh,
parenting or with difficult spouses," or have you had that reaction?
we have.
I don't. I think I can say on a regular basis, but of course, then it depends on how regular. But people who say you've rescued our marriage,
Wow.
for sure, for sure. Yeah. People come afterwards and say there is a before and after in their lives, because you cannot not grow in your private life when you're growing at work. I mean, as I said, it's still the same soul, and you're opening up, so you see things you didn't see before. And as you mentioned before, when you and I were working together, that empathy, you bring it into your personal life as well as to work. So we're getting close to the end. It's just been wonderful being in your company, sharing some memories, and also, reminding me of situations that we've been in, both in our personal lives and also at work. I'm thinking of parenting, different relationships, our relationship, and also different relationships at work that we've had. I want to really thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this with me and for being part of my life.
It's been wonderful. I've learned so much about walking through that doorway of fear, like, oh, I don't want to change or I don't want to appear vulnerable, and realizing, getting curious, asking yourselves questions, actually, and walking through that door of fear. Actually, there's so much more freedom on the other side, and it's a lovely way to live when you're more courageous. It's been really fun.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Let me summarize today's episode in 3 points. Point 1. To lead courageously is to do what's best, despite your fears. Point 2. As a courageous leader, you make a difference. It might be at work, it might be at home, it might be both. It applies in every part of life, from the boardroom to the kitchen table. Point 3. Think about a moment in your life where you feel stuck or unsure of what to do. What would you do if you were courageous? In the next episode of the Courage Made Simple podcast, we'll start to dive into the courageous leader process. What are the steps to take to move from feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or frustrated to feeling more confident, capable, and courageous? You'll get a simple, flexible structure that you can use both in the moment and for long-term growth, making it your own personal guide. Plus, you'll be able to download a free guide that gives you an overview of the entire process. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who might find it valuable. You can DM me on LinkedIn and Instagram at Margareta Kull, or visit our website at courageous-leader.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts and answer your questions in future episodes. That's it. Thank you for listening. Dare to make a difference. Before we wrap up, here is the legal bit. You know, the fine print I need to mention. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. I'm just your companion on this journey. I'm not a licensed therapist, and this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, psychotherapist, or other qualified professionals.